So I finally got my first NAS as a videographer. I got the UGREEN DXP6800 Pro. It's the 6-bay NAS. I noticed that a lot of the YouTube videos that I found on this were all sponsored, or some of them were just sent the NAS for free to review. I'm not one of those. I actually bought this with my own money and I filled it up with 3 24 terabyte hard drives, and I'm planning on adding an additional hard drive whenever I start to run out of space. And I just wanted to give you an idea of how my experience went with this UGREEN. Overall, it was actually pretty self-explanatory to set up most of the things. There were some times where I had hiccups and I didn't really know what to do or what I should do, so I watched some tutorials from a few people that I'm gonna show here visually on the screen. They had pretty good startup videos, just basic beginner guides on how to set these up and work with them. So I recommend you watch these videos if you want a more comprehensive review or a guide on the setup process. So essentially what a NAS is, if you're not familiar, is it's basically its own little computer whose sole purpose is to just house hard drives or SSDs. So it's basically just a big box of storage that is connected to the internet and also can be connected straight to your computer so that you have faster speeds than what you'd normally get with you know, a normal external hard drive. Like one of these standard hard drives that operate at USB 3 speeds, they're only gonna give you like 130 megabytes per second. And of course, they're not connected to the internet, so you can't access these anywhere unless you have the drive physically with you. Whereas with a NAS, I could literally log in on my phone, or I can go on my laptop and access all of my files, even if I'm not here in my home. And if I am here in my home and it's connected to my computer, which it is via a 10 gigabit Ethernet cable, then you get speeds that are even, like I said, faster than this hard drive. The reason I really wanted this is because as a videographer, I like to keep all the projects that I shoot for at least 3 or 4 years. Sometimes the client asks for it, other times they don't, but I like to do that not only for the peace of mind, for in case they ask in the future to use the footage again for another video, but also it's for my own purposes. Sometimes I like to reuse content for my own portfolio or to showcase different shoots that I've been on, you know, on Instagram, creating different reels. So there's a bunch of different reasons for why I want to keep a lot of my projects. And I also have other things like a bunch of VFX and sound assets that I want to be able to access wherever I am. And I have a full-time job where I also manage a bunch of video files for that company. So there's a bunch of data and I don't want it to all be scattered across multiple hard drives. This is only like half of the hard drives that I have. I have like a total of 20 of them. My old system was I have 2 identical hard drives that are backups of each other so that if one of them fails, I have the other one there as a safety. And the reason you would do this is because, first of all, this is client work. You don't want to lose it. And second of all, external hard drives are most prone to failure. They have physical disks inside of them, so that makes them less reliable by default than SSDs. So if I'm keeping these files for 2 to 5 years, I'm gonna want a backup. And so having all of these hard drives is a headache. Not only does it take a lot of space, but a lot of times when I do need to go back and edit the files that are on these hard drives, I get faced with the dilemma of, well, should I edit off of the hard drives, which is really cumbersome because they're slow and they don't edit 10-bit 4K files well. Or I'd have to transfer them out from the hard drive to whatever SSD I am currently working on, but then that also takes time. But with this NAS, I'm getting consistent transfer speeds of about 400 megabytes per second. That's more than double the transfer speed of these hard drives. And they also have better write speeds, and I'm using NVMe cache with it. So editing off of the NAS is actually doable, especially if I want to do something quick and simple and be done with it. Whereas with these hard drives, sometimes it takes 15 minutes just to relink all the files because the read speeds are so horrendous. So when it comes to quickly accessing files from previous projects, even projects that I've filmed 1 or 2 years ago, it becomes a lot easier. And this is something that I actually do quite often. There are projects where we'll shoot interviews for people and we want to use B-roll from an event that we filmed 8 months ago. Well, that event isn't on my current SSD anymore that has the projects that I'm working on currently. No, I've offloaded it, usually to the other hard drives. So having to go back to those hard drives and pull footage from them is just really annoying. And that's one of the biggest reasons why I really wanted the NAS. I wanted just one big place where I have all of my data and it's quickly accessible on my PC and also relatively quickly accessible anywhere else in the world. Another reason why I love this NAS setup, and this is something I obviously learned about recently, is RAID 5. The fact that right now I have 3 hard drives, but the way RAID 5 works is where if one of the drives stops working, I don't lose any of my data. The other 2 drives will have that data, and then all I have to do is bring in a 3rd drive, replace the broken one, and it will like refetch the data across all 3 drives. It uses some complicated math BS that I have no idea how it works, but basically you sacrifice a little bit of space for that feature, but you gain a little bit more security. Now mind you, this doesn't count as a backup, so I still keep a few of these hard drives around to back up the things that are on my NAS, so I still have them in a separate physical location. Another reason why I really like this NAS is the ease of expandability. See, in my videography business, every year or so, I find myself buying 2 to 4 of these hard drives. Again, because I always buy in pairs so that each hard drive is a backup of another one to have redundancy. So it's really easy to rack up a bunch of hard drives all in one place, and you start to need more space for it and it becomes really cumbersome. But with this NAS, it's the easiest thing to do, to just open up a slot, put in a big old 24 terabyte hard drives, insert it, and you're set. You're good for another 2 to 3 years. So the way to expand its storage, it's just so much easier and just as cost effective, because an enterprise 24 terabyte hard drive for these kind of NASs is like $600 Canadian, whereas it's $150 to $200 to have a 5 terabyte hard drive, one of these external ones. So it's a big initial investment to get into a system like this, but it's really good for long-term storage. Quick tip, if you do get any NAS, please get a UPS for the NAS. One of these big machines that hold power for like 15 minutes or so for a device, so that if there is a power outage, it keeps it on for a short period of time and then it shuts it down itself in a normal way so that none of the files get corrupted. You would think that you wouldn't need this. Trust me, I live in Toronto and I don't remember the last time I've lost power. 3 days after I got this NAS, there was a power outage in my building. And if I didn't have this UPS, there could have been quite a potential to lose data. So even though it's gonna add, I don't know, an extra $200 or so to your NAS purchase, it is definitely needed. Don't cheap out on a UPS. Now here's one thing I need to be honest about. I've never been an IT guy. I've never dabbled with networking and stuff like this. So this endeavor of getting the NAS, kind of difficult for me. There's quite a bit of a learning curve to this kind of stuff, I found, where I have to, at least know what I'm doing when it comes to connecting to the right IP and setting up all of the necessary things to actually get 10 gigabit internet through the PC. So there's a lot of things I'm still learning about this. So here's something that I'm actually still trying to figure out how to do. When it comes to accessing the files of this NAS remotely, like on my phone or on my laptop, and get fast speeds, to be exact, I want 1 gigabit download speed, because my NAS right now is also connected to the Ethernet router, not just my computer. It's connected to the router via a 1 gigabit port. So you would think that if you're outside and you're downloading stuff from the NAS, that it would be at 1 gigabit speeds, right? No, at least on the UGREEN, when you're using the built-in remote share or whatever it's called, if I do that through the app in the normal way that they instruct you to, I only get about 100 megabits of download speed, even if I'm doing it from a laptop or a desktop remotely. Now there are ways to combat that. For example, you can use Tailscale and a VPN, and there's different methods where you can access the NAS remotely and get full download speeds. So if I have a laptop with me somewhere else, I can download footage at 1 gigabit speeds if I'm using those methods. But the thing that I want to figure out, that I'm still kind of trying to learn how to do, and if anybody knows about this, please in the comments point me to resources to where I can try to learn this, is I want to be able to send links to clients, people who don't have Tailscale or VPNs installed. I want to be able to send a link to one of my folders so that they can download a bunch of my footage. That is something that I haven't figured out how to do, and while utilizing fast download speeds. Because even if you have 1 gigabit internet in your home, if I send you a link right now to one of my folders on my NAS, you would only be able to download it at the speed of about 70 to 100 megabits at most. There's ways that I've heard of that I really don't know anything about, like reverse proxies and stuff like that. It's an entirely new world, the world of networking. So I'm just giving you a heads up that this is not just a plug and play. Depending on which computer you have, depending on your motherboard and your home setup, it can get cumbersome to get this whole thing set up. But once you do, it's really cool having all of your space in one big source like this. So speaking of things not being super easy and straightforward, there is one other problem that I've been having that I think I solved, but I'm still not sure. I'm kind of working through it. The problem is, even though I have my 10 gigabit Ethernet cord connected from the NAS to the computer, the thing is I also have an Ethernet cord that goes from the NAS to the router. So the NAS is connected to 2 different places. And my computer is also connected to my router and to the NAS. So keeping that in mind, the problem I've been having is occasionally, this doesn't happen all the time, but when I boot up my computer from sleep or from a shutdown, and I do, let's say, some sort of a video transfer to the NAS, the transfer speeds are kind of slow. They're at 100 megabytes per second. And then I realized that when I go to the network connections, disable my Ethernet cable that is going to the router, not the NAS, the router cable, I just disable that just to test it, and then I copy the same file, I get full 10 gigabit speeds. So what I realized is the computer, or the NAS, I don't know what it is, the computer keeps defaulting to the 1 gigabit connection to the NAS rather than the 10 gigabit connection. And every time I booted up the computer, I've had to disable and enable the router Ethernet so that it kind of forces the computer to use the NAS cable. So I went on Tom's Hardware's forums to ask for help, and some people gave me pretty good indicators on what the problem could be. I implemented one of the fixes, and so far it actually seems to be working perfectly. I did a restart of the computer, I went on sleep and then back to wake, and it's now defaulting to the 10 gigabit cable already. I don't have to do any of the enabling and disabling, but again, this happened occasionally to me, not all the time. So I just want to kind of give it a few more days to see how it works. But the point is that expect to face problems with this. From what I've seen working with a NAS, it's not just, again, it's not just plug and play and everything works perfectly. No, there's going to be some issues, especially probably I would imagine if you're on Windows like I am, you might face a lot of issues where, oh, the IP isn't working for some reason, or, oh, it's giving you the 1 gigabit instead of the 10 gigabit. There's going to be stuff, and so expect that to happen and expect to troubleshoot some things and to have to kind of learn how to do some of this stuff, at least just the basics.